Welcome back, everyone, to a new story. We really hope you enjoy it. It started, like all catastrophically bad ideas do, with a bottle of cheap whiskey and the suffocating feeling of a dead end. Caleb and I were sitting on the worn-out couch in my tiny apartment, the eviction notice on the coffee table serving as a coaster. He had lost his job at the tech startup that went bust, and my so-called freelance graphic design career had dried up into a puddle of unpaid invoices. My girlfriend, Sarah, had left me 2 weeks prior, citing my lack of ambition. She wasn't wrong. "We're drowning, Jack," Caleb said, his voice low and steady. It was that steadiness that always unnerved me, while I was a storm of anxiety, a frantic mess of flailing limbs and racing thoughts. Caleb was the eye of the hurricane, calm, focused, and terrifyingly clear. "Tell me something I don't know," I muttered, staring at the amber liquid in my glass. "I have a plan," he said. I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. Another one? Is it a revolutionary new app for rating public restrooms or a gourmet food truck selling only toast? He didn't smile. He just leaned forward, his dark eyes locking onto mine. A real plan, one that solves everything: money, freedom, a clean slate. And that's how he pitched it. A bank heist, not some Hollywood smash and grab, but a meticulous, data-driven operation targeting a small regional bank with outdated security systems he'd been tracking for months. It was insane. It was suicidal. And in the haze of whiskey and desperation, it sounded like the only logical thing in the world. The heist itself is a blur now, a fever dream of adrenaline and fear. I remember the scratchy feel of the ski mask against my face, the chemical smell of the dye packs, the way my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I was the driver, the lookout, the nervous wreck. Caleb was inside, cool as ice, moving with a purpose that felt almost rehearsed. It worked. God help us, it actually worked. We got away with 3 heavy duffel bags, the sirens wailing in the distance like the cries of a world we were leaving behind forever. I drove like a madman, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, my eyes darting to the rearview mirror every 2 seconds. Caleb, on the other hand, was serene. He'd taken off his mask and was looking out the passenger window, a small, thoughtful smile on his face. "We did it," I gasped, my voice trembling. "We actually did it." "This was just the first step," he said calmly, his gaze still fixed on the passing blur of city lights. "The hard part comes next." We ditched the car in a pre-planned spot and switched to a beat-up, anonymous-looking van he'd stashed in a long-term parking garage. I thought we were heading for the border, maybe Mexico or Canada, a place where we could disappear. But Caleb kept driving deeper into the industrial outskirts of the city, a wasteland of rust and concrete. Finally, he pulled into a dilapidated, corrugated metal warehouse. The place looked like it had been abandoned for decades. He killed the engine, and the sudden silence was deafening. "What is this place?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Caleb, where are we?" He turned to me, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something new in his eyes, not just calmness, but an almost manic excitement. "This," he said, his voice filled with a strange reverence, "is where everything changes." He got out of the van, leaving me to stare after him, a cold dread seeping into my bones. This wasn't just about the money. This was something else entirely, and I had a terrible feeling I was no longer a partner in this plan, but just a passenger on Caleb's terrifying ride. I followed Caleb into the warehouse, the heavy metal door groaning shut behind us with a sound of finality. The air inside was cold and smelled sterile, a bizarre mix of ozone, rubbing alcohol, and something else, something faintly metallic and sweet. A single row of harsh fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting long, distorted shadows across the cavernous space. In the center of the concrete floor stood a single gleaming metal table, like something out of a morgue or a sci-fi movie. Next to it was a stainless steel cart laden with vials, syringes, and strange-looking medical instruments I couldn't identify. And standing beside the cart, waiting for us, was a man. He was tall and thin, dressed in a pristine white lab coat that seemed to glow in the dim light. He had thinning gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and a face that was completely devoid of expression. He looked less like a doctor and more like an undertaker. "David," Caleb said, his voice echoing slightly in the vast space. He gestured towards the man. "Jack. This is David. He's the one who's going to help us disappear. My mind was reeling. Disappear? What are you talking about? I thought we were going to run. New identities, a new country. That was the deal. My voice was rising, bordering on hysterical. Running isn't enough. Jack, Caleb said, his tone patient, as if explaining something to a child. They have our faces. Our biometrics are in a dozen databases. Facial recognition, gait analysis. They'd find us in a week. We can't just change our names. We have to change everything. The man, David, just watched us, his hands clasped behind his back. He hadn't said a word. What does that even mean? I demanded, turning on Caleb. You've been lying to me this whole time. This wasn't part of the plan. This was always my part of the plan. Caleb corrected me, his voice hardening. I just knew you wouldn't understand. I knew you'd panic. He wasn't wrong. I was panicking. My gaze darted from the cold, impassive face of the doctor to the menacing gleam of the metal table. No way. Whatever this is, I'm out. I'll take my share and I'll take my chances. There is no your share if you get caught, Caleb snapped, his composure finally cracking. And you will get caught. You'll be easy to find. A scared, desperate man with a new bank account full of stolen money. You'll be in a cell by morning, and you'll give me up without a second thought. He took a deep breath, reining himself in. His voice softened again, becoming persuasive. If you want to survive, Jack, if you really want to be free, you have to trust me. Just this one last time. He didn't wait for my answer. He turned, walked over to the table, and began to unbutton his shirt. A knot of pure dread tightened in my stomach. Wait, Caleb, what the hell are you doing? I stammered, my voice trembling. He took off his shirt and jeans, leaving him in his boxers. He was lean and muscular, the picture of health. He looked at me, his expression unreadable, and then he lay down on the cold metal table, his arms resting at his sides. He looked up at the humming lights, perfectly still. David finally moved. He walked over to the cart, picked up a syringe filled with a shimmering pale green liquid, and approached the table. He didn't look at me. He didn't acknowledge my presence at all. His focus was entirely on Caleb. No, I yelled, taking a step forward. Caleb, get up. We can still get out of here. Caleb just turned his head slightly and looked at me. There was no fear in his eyes, only a profound, unsettling sense of peace. It's okay, Jack, he said, his voice soft. This is what I want. And as David pushed the needle into his arm and depressed the plunger, I could only stand there, frozen in horror, watching the beginning of the end of my best friend. The change began subtly. A faint tremor ran through Caleb's body. He closed his eyes, and his breathing deepened. David stepped back from the table, observing his work with the detached curiosity of a scientist watching a chemical reaction. What did you do to him? I whispered, my voice hoarse. David glanced at me, his eyes cold behind his glasses. I initiated a sequence, a total genetic cascade recalibration, accelerated cellular mitosis, hormonal restructuring, osteomorphic reconfiguration. It was just a string of clinical-sounding words, but the reality unfolding before my eyes was a nightmare. Caleb let out a soft groan, not of pain, but almost of release. A sheen of sweat broke out across his skin. I watched, mesmerized and horrified, as the hard lines of his jaw began to soften, the sharp angle of his chin rounding into a more delicate curve. His Adam's apple seemed to shrink, melting back into his throat. His skin, once weathered and tanned, started to lose its texture. It grew smoother, paler, the pores tightening until it looked as flawless as polished porcelain. His body hair receded, vanishing from his chest and arms as if it had never been there. Then came the real shift. He gasped, his back arching off the table, and a sound that was half scream, half moan escaped his lips. I could hear a faint, sickening series of cracks and pops as his entire skeletal structure began to change. His shoulders narrowed, the broad, powerful frame I'd known my whole life contracting, pulling inward, his waist cinched, his hips flaring out in a smooth, dramatic curve that was undeniably feminine. I wanted to look away, to run, but I was paralyzed. My brain couldn't process what it was seeing. It was like watching a clay sculpture being reshaped by an invisible, violent artist. His dark, short-cropped hair began to move, to grow. It spilled down past his ears, then to his new, slender shoulders, darkening to a rich, glossy chestnut brown. It kept growing, tumbling down his back in soft waves until it rested near the small of his back. The most shocking change was his chest. The flat, muscular pectorals swelled, the tissue expanding with impossible speed. His boxers strained and then ripped at the sides as his lower body reshaped itself. He let out a sharp cry, and two soft, round mounds blossomed on his chest, forming perfect, firm breasts that rose and fell with his ragged breaths. The entire process took less than 5 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. When it was over, the person on the table was a complete stranger. Where Caleb, my rugged, masculine best friend, had been, there was now a woman, a stunningly beautiful woman, with a heart-shaped face, full lips, and a body that was all soft curves and graceful lines. She looked to be in her early 20s, vibrant and impossibly alluring. She lay still for a moment, her chest rising and falling. Then her eyelids fluttered open. The eyes were the same deep brown as Caleb's, but they held a completely different light. They scanned the ceiling for a second before turning to look at her own body. She lifted a delicate, slender hand. Flexing the long, graceful fingers, she ran it down her flat stomach, over the curve of her hip, and then up to cup one of her new breasts. A slow, wondering smile spread across her face. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated triumph. David walked over and held up a large, hand-held mirror. She pushed herself up into a sitting position, the long chestnut hair cascading around her bare shoulders. She took the mirror and stared at her reflection, her smile widening. "It's perfect," she whispered, her voice alight, musical alto that sent a shiver down my spine. It was nothing like Caleb's baritone. She looked over at me, her brown eyes dancing with an emotion I couldn't place, excitement or relief. "Well, Jack," she asked, her new voice teasing, "what do you think?" I couldn't speak. I could only stare at the woman who used to be Caleb. She laughed, a lovely melodic sound. "No one will ever suspect me now." She swung her legs off the side of the table, standing up with a natural grace that seemed impossible. She was completely naked, and completely unashamed. "I think I'll call myself Allison." She stood there, a perfect, impossible creature born from the ashes of my best friend. And as I looked at Allison, I felt a dizzying cocktail of emotions, terror, disgust, grief for the friend I had lost, and a tiny, shameful spark of something else, a strange, unwelcome flicker of attraction. I stumbled back, my legs weak. This couldn't be real. It was a hallucination. The stress of the heist had finally broken my mind. But Allison was real, and she was looking at me expectantly. Then she looked at David. "He's next." My blood ran cold. "No," I said, my voice shaking as I backed away towards the door. "No, you can't. I won't let you." Allison took a step toward me, her expression turning serious. "Jack, be reasonable. What's your plan?" "You walk out that door, and what you're a wanted man. The police have security footage. They have your description. They have you. You'll be a headline by noon tomorrow." "I don't care. I'd rather go to jail than become—" I couldn't even say it. I gestured helplessly at her. A flicker of hurt crossed her face. So quick, I almost missed it. "Then become someone they can't find. Someone who's free, Jack. This isn't a punishment. This is the escape. This is the clean slate we talked about." "This is a nightmare," I shouted, my back hitting the cold metal of the door. "You're not Caleb anymore. I don't even know what you are." "I'm alive," she said, her voice intense. "And I'm going to stay that way. Are you? Or are you going to throw away your life, and mine, because you're scared of something new?" She walked closer, her bare feet silent on the concrete floor. She was shorter than Caleb had been, but she still had an intimidating presence. "Think about it. They find you. You panic. You confess. You tell them everything, including the $30 million we have in those bags. You think they'll go easy on you? You'll rot in a cell for the rest of your life. And I'll be hunted. Is that what you want?" Her logic was a cold, sharp knife, cutting through my panic. She was right. I had no way out. My face was plastered on every internal security alert in the state. I was trapped. It was this, or a cage. My fight drained out of me, replaced by a hollow, bottomless despair. My shoulders slumped. I looked from Allison's beautiful, alien face to David's impassive one. and then to the gleaming metal table that was waiting for me. There was no choice. There never had been. I let out a shuddering breath that sounded like a sob. "Fine," I whispered. A wave of relief washed over Allison's features. She gave me a small, encouraging smile. "You're doing the right thing. Jack, you'll see." Numbly, I walked toward the table. My movements were stiff and robotic, like a condemned man walking to the gallows. I stripped off my clothes, folding them into a neat pile with shaking hands. The act felt surreal, a final farewell to the man I had been my entire life, lying down on the metal table. The cold surface was a shock against my bare skin. I stared up at the buzzing lights, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm of terror. David approached with a fresh syringe of the green liquid. I flinched as the needle pierced my skin, a sharp, cold sting. He injected the fluid, and the burning started almost immediately. It was different for me than it had been for Caleb, or at least, my experience of it was. His transformation seemed like a release. Mine was a violation. A searing heat spread through my veins, an agonizing fire that felt like it was boiling my blood. My muscles spasmed and convulsed. I cried out, tears streaming from the corners of my eyes, blurring the lights above into a meaningless smear. It felt like I was being torn apart from the inside out. My bones ground against each other, reshaping themselves with excruciating slowness. I felt my height decrease, my limbs shortening and slenderizing. My shoulders felt like they were being crushed in a vice as they narrowed. The pain in my hips was a deep, blinding agony as they widened, stretching my skin taut. Through the haze of pain, I felt a strange counterpoint, a bizarre, tingling pleasure that was almost as terrifying as the agony. It was a deep, full-body hum, a rewiring of my entire nervous system. My skin became hypersensitive, the cool air of the warehouse a caress against my new hairless body. My hair felt like it was on fire as it grew, a cascade of black silk tickling my shoulders and back. My face felt like hot wax being remolded, my jaw softening, my cheeks filling out, my lips plumping, and then, the pressure in my chest, a tight, aching fullness that blossomed into two small, sensitive mounds of flesh. I sobbed, a broken, high-pitched sound that didn't sound like my own voice. When it was finally over, I lay there, trembling and spent, covered in a thin sheen of sweat. I felt hollow, empty. My body was a stranger's. It was lighter, softer, and achingly vulnerable. I heard Allison's voice, gentle and close. "It's okay. It's over now." David held the mirror over me. I forced myself to look. Staring back at me was a girl I'd never seen before. She had pale skin, wide, frightened blue eyes, and a cascade of straight black hair that framed a delicate, heart-shaped face. She was pretty, in a fragile, doe-eyed sort of way. Her body was slim but soft, with small breasts and gently curving hips. She was a complete stranger. A single tear rolled down the stranger's cheek. "That's me," I whispered, and the voice that came out was a soft, breathy soprano. Hearing it sent a fresh wave of shock through me. I started to shake, a deep, uncontrollable tremor. This was too much. The reality of it crashed down on me, and I felt like I was shattering. Suddenly, I felt arms wrap around me. Allison was leaning over the table, pulling me into a hug. Her skin was warm, her embrace surprisingly strong. She held me tight as I sobbed against her shoulder, my new body racked with grief for the old one. "Shh," she murmured, stroking my long black hair. "It's okay, we're safe now, now we're free." Her touch was comforting, but also deeply unsettling. It was the first time we'd ever had this kind of physical contact, and in these new bodies, it felt charged with a strange, confusing intimacy that I didn't know how to handle. All I knew was that Jack was gone, and this new person, this trembling girl in the mirror, was all that was left. After I had cried myself out, Allison gently helped me sit up. I felt dizzy and disconnected, my limbs feeling both too light and strangely clumsy. David, who had watched my breakdown with the same dispassionate air he'd watched everything else, simply nodded. "The process is complete," he stated, as if commenting on the weather. "Now for the final stage, come." He led us toward a door at the back of the warehouse I hadn't noticed before. It opened into a small, brightly lit room that was a stark contrast to the grim laboratory. It was a large walk-in closet, lined with racks of women's clothing, Dresses, skirts, blouses, jeans, sweaters, every style imaginable. There were shelves of shoes, from sneakers to stilettos, and a vanity table with a huge mirror, covered in makeup, perfume, and hair accessories. On a central island, drawers were filled with neatly folded lingerie. It was overwhelming. A wave of profound shame washed over me. I instinctively crossed my arms over my new small breasts, trying to cover myself. My body felt alien enough. The idea of putting these clothes on it felt like a final, humiliating surrender. Allison, on the other hand, lit up. She walked into the room with an air of pure delight, running her hands over the fabrics. Wow, David, you thought of everything. My clients require a comprehensive service, he said flatly. Everything here is new, the sizes are varied, find what fits. Allison went straight for the lingerie drawer, pulling out a lacy pink bra and matching panties without a hint of self-consciousness. She held them up against her body, admiring the effect in the mirror. I think I'll start with these. I just stood there, frozen by the door. Allison noticed my hesitation. Come on, she said gently, her voice losing its teasing edge. You can't walk out of here naked. We have to look the part. She came over and took my hand. Her touch was warm and firm. Let's find you something. What name do you want? I hadn't even thought about it. A name. I was no longer Jack. I don't know. How about Abby, she suggested. Allison and Abby. It has a nice ring to it. Abby? It sounded as foreign as the body I was in. I just nodded numbly, unable to form words. Okay, Abby, she said with a smile. Let's get you dressed. She guided me to the lingerie drawer. The sight of all that lace and silk made my stomach churn. She picked out a simple, soft-looking bra in a pale blue and a matching pair of cotton panties. Here, these look comfortable. Let's start with the basics. Putting them on was one of the most awkward and mortifying experiences of my life. My fingers fumbled with the clasp on the bra, unable to get it to hook behind my back. Allison had to help me, her fingers brushing against my skin, sending an unwanted jolt through me. The feeling of the fabric encasing my chest was bizarre, a light, constant pressure that was a perpetual reminder of my new anatomy. The panties felt flimsy and insubstantial compared to the boxers I'd worn my whole life. Next came the stockings. Allison picked out a pair of sheer, nude stockings. These will make your legs look great, she said. The sensation of pulling the silky nylon up my smooth, slender legs was deeply unsettling. The fabric clung to my skin, cool and slick. I felt fragile, exposed. Every nerve ending seemed to be on high alert. While I was struggling with my new undergarments, Allison had dressed with an easy confidence. She had chosen a bright pink crop top that showed off her flat stomach and a short white pleated skirt. She paired it with white ankle socks and chunky sneakers. It was a cute, sporty, and youthful look. She looked like she'd been wearing clothes like this her entire life. She then turned her attention to me. You seem more like a dress person, she mused, scanning the racks. She pulled out a simple, long-sleeved dress in a dark teal color. It was made of a soft, stretchy fabric that clung to the body. Try this. I pulled the dress over my head. The material was soft, but it hugged every new curve, leaving nothing to the imagination. I stared at my reflection. Abby stared back, a slim girl in a form-fitting dress, looking lost and terrified. And shoes, Allison declared, heading to the shelves. She bypassed the sneakers and flats, grabbing a pair of black pumps with a thin 3-inch heel. You have to learn some time. Trying to walk in them was a disaster. I wobbled, my ankles threatening to give out with every step. I felt like a newborn foal. Point your toes. Walk heel to toe, Allison instructed, holding my arm to steady me. You'll get it. The whole process felt like a surreal and degrading game of dress-up. The scent of perfume in the air, the soft rustle of fabrics, the click of Allison's and now my heels on the floor. This was my new reality. This was my new skin, my new uniform. When we were both dressed, David re-entered the room. He was holding 2 small leather wallets. Your new identities, he said, handing one to each of us. I opened mine with trembling fingers. Inside was a driver's license. The picture was of the girl in the mirror of Abby. The name read, Abby Winters. There was a social security card and a platinum credit card under the same name. They looked completely, terrifyingly real. They are perfectly legal. Backdated and untraceable, David said, answering my unasked question. You now officially exist. Allison Parker and Abby Winters, your old selves are, for all intents and purposes, gone. He gestured to the duffel bags of money, which were now sitting by the door. The full amount is there, $30 million. Split it however you see fit. My services have already been compensated from a separate account, as per my agreement with your predecessor. He gave a slight nod toward Allison. My business with you is concluded, he said, his tone as final as a closing door. I suggest you leave. A taxi has been called to a nearby address. It will arrive in 10 minutes. Do not contact me again. And with that, he turned and walked back into the lab, leaving us alone in the dressing room, two new women with new names, new bodies, and a staggering amount of stolen money at our feet. The dream of freedom had become a very strange and frightening reality. We divided the money silently, stuffing bundles of cash into two large designer handbags we found in the dressing room. The weight of it was immense, both physically and metaphorically. $15 million. It was a sum so vast it felt like a number in a video game, not real currency. Ready? Allison asked, slinging her bag over her shoulder. She looked vibrant, excited, like a girl on her way to an adventure. I just nodded, my own bag feeling like a block of lead. I took one last look in the mirror. Abby Winters, a stranger. I felt a pang of grief so sharp it almost buckled my knees. Jack was dead, and I was his ghost, trapped in this bizarre costume. Walking out of the warehouse and into the pre-dawn light was a shock. The world seemed different. Or maybe I was the one who was different. The air felt colder on my bare legs. The sounds of the city seemed louder, more intrusive. My body felt fragile, a delicate instrument I didn't know how to play. The heels were a constant, painful reminder of my new enforced femininity. We walked the 2 blocks to the address David had given us, a deserted bus stop under a flickering street lamp. I was acutely aware of everything, the way my new hips swayed when I walked, the soft bounce of my hair against my shoulders, the way Allison moved beside me with an easy, confident rhythm. A yellow taxi pulled up to the curb precisely on time. The driver, a middle-aged man with a tired face, leaned over to open the back door for us. "Morning, ladies," he grunted. Ladies, the word hit me like a physical blow. We slid into the back seat. The vinyl was cool against my legs. I pulled the hem of my dress down, a sudden powerful wave of modesty washing over me. Allison gave the driver the address of a high-end hotel in the city center. As we drove, I couldn't stop staring out the window, watching the familiar streets of my city transform into a foreign landscape, but I could feel the driver's eyes on us. Every time we stopped at a red light, I'd catch his gaze in the rearview mirror. He wasn't looking at the road. He was looking at us. His eyes lingered on Allison's bare legs, then drifted over to me, a slow, appraising look that made my skin crawl. He thought we were just two pretty girls out late. He was admiring the view. A hot blush crept up my neck and spread across my cheeks. I felt pinned by his gaze, objectified and powerless. I clutched my handbag in my lap, my knuckles turning white, and instinctively crossed my legs, trying to make myself smaller. Allison, next to me, seemed completely unfazed. If anything, she seemed to be enjoying the attention. She casually stretched, arching her back in a way that pushed her chest forward. And I saw the driver's eyes widen for a second in the mirror before he quickly looked away. This was our new world. This was how people would see us now. Not as people, necessarily, but as bodies to be looked at, judged, and desired. For Allison, this was a source of power. For me, it felt like a cage. The tension in the cab was thick with unspoken things, the driver's casual leering, Allison's confident performance of femininity, and my own silent, screaming panic. I hated this. I hated the feeling of being watched, the vulnerability, the soft, weak body that invited this kind of scrutiny. I hated the dress that clung to me, the heels that crippled me, and the long hair that fell in my face. But most of all, I hated the small, treacherous part of me that was coiled in my stomach, a tiny, confusing knot of feeling that wasn't just shame or fear, because when the driver had looked at me, underneath the humiliation, there had been a flicker of something else, a strange, unnerving flutter. The part of me that was now Abby had recognized his look not just as a threat, but as validation. "He thinks you're pretty." The thought was a venomous whisper in the back of my mind, and I hated myself for it. I hated this body for making me feel it. When we finally arrived at the hotel, I practically leaped out of the car. Allison paid the driver, adding a generous tip. "Have a nice day," she said with a dazzling smile. "You too, sweethearts," he replied, his eyes giving us one last sweep. As we walked into the gleaming, opulent lobby of the hotel, surrounded by marble floors and crystal chandeliers, I felt more lost and alone than I ever had in my life. Allison had booked us a suite under her new name. We were Allison Parker and Abby Winters, two wealthy young women starting a new life. She was thriving. She saw this body as a key, a tool, a chance to have everything she ever wanted. I saw it as a prison, and I had no idea how I was going to survive the life sentence. The first few weeks were a disorienting blur. We lived in that hotel suite, a gilded cage high above the city. For Allison, it was a playground. She ordered room service, shopped online for entire new wardrobes, and spent hours in front of the mirror, experimenting with makeup and hairstyles. She embraced her new identity with a ferocious, almost desperate zeal. She started an Instagram account, posting stylized photos of herself, Allison enjoying champagne on the balcony, Allison posing in a new designer dress. She was curating a life, building a persona from scratch, and she was a natural. I was the opposite. I felt like an imposter. Every morning, I'd wake up and for a fleeting, blissful second, I'd forget. I'd feel the familiar weight of my own body, the rough texture of stubble on my chin. Then I'd open my eyes, see the long black hair splayed across the pillow, feel the soft weight on my chest, and the crushing reality would come crashing down all over again. The simple act of living was a minefield of challenges. I had to learn to walk without tripping in anything other than flats. I had to figure out the bewildering world of bras underwire. Push-up, bralette. I had to learn how to sit, stand, and move in a way that didn't feel like a man awkwardly puppeteering a female body. And then there were the hormones. My emotions were a chaotic storm. I would find myself crying during a sad commercial or feel a surge of irrational anger over something trivial. It was like my own mind was betraying me, flooded with chemicals it didn't understand. Allison seemed to handle it better, channeling her new emotional intensity into her ambitions. I just felt broken and volatile. After a month, Allison announced she was buying a house, a sleek, modern villa in the hills overlooking the city. "We can't live in a hotel forever, Abby," she'd said, scrolling through real estate listings on her laptop. "You're buying a house," I corrected her. "I need to get my own place. We can't do this together." I needed space. I needed to get away from her effortless confidence, which only highlighted my own miserable failure at being a woman. She was hurt, I could tell, but she understood. So, I found a small furnished apartment in a quiet, anonymous part of the city. Moving in was the loneliest day of my life. The apartment was clean, modern, and completely empty of any personality. It was a blank slate, just like me. For weeks, I barely left. I lived off delivery food and spent my days watching TV, trying to numb the constant hum of anxiety and dysphoria. The clothes Allison had bought for me hung in the closet, a collection of accusing silhouettes. I mostly lived in sweatpants and oversized t-shirts, trying to hide the body I was in. But eventually, the loneliness and the four walls started to close in, and I was running out of food. I had to go outside. Putting on Abby clothes felt like preparing for battle. I chose the least revealing outfit I could find, a pair of simple blue jeans that fit surprisingly well, a plain gray sweater, and a pair of flat ankle boots. I spent 20 minutes trying to put my hair into a simple ponytail, my fingers clumsy and inept. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, a plain, nervous-looking girl. It was a pathetic disguise, but it would have to do. The supermarket was an assault on the senses. The bright lights, the cheerful music, the crowds of people. I felt a familiar paranoia creep in. The certainty that everyone was staring at me, that they could see through my disguise, that they knew I was a fraud. I kept my head down, pushing my cart through the aisles, grabbing items at random. I was in the cereal aisle, trying to decide between Cheerios and Raisin Bran, when a voice next to me said, "Tough choice, huh?" I flinched, startled. A man was standing there, smiling at me. He was about my age, with kind eyes and a friendly, open face. He was holding a carton of milk. "Oh, yeah," I mumbled, my voice coming out as a squeak. I could feel my face getting hot. "I'm a Frosted Flakes man, myself," he said, his smile widening. "Can't go wrong with a classic. I'm Mark. By the way." Abby, I said, the name feeling like a lie on my tongue. Nice to meet you, Abby. His gaze was warm, not leering like the taxi drivers. He was just, being friendly, but it sent my heart into a frantic gallop. This was the first time a stranger had spoken to me, to Abby, in a normal, everyday situation. Are you new around here, he asked. I shop here all the time, and I'm pretty sure I'd remember seeing you. My mind went blank. Yes, I just moved in down the street. Well, welcome to the neighborhood, he said cheerfully. If you need anything, or just want someone to show you the best coffee shop, let me know. He pulled a pen from his pocket and scribbled his number on a napkin from his pocket. He held it out to me. I stared at his hand, then at the napkin. He was hitting on me. He was flirting with me. A man was giving me Abby, his phone number. The old Jack, the man I used to be, would have known how to handle this. He would have clapped the guy on the shoulder, made a joke, been one of the guys. But Abby had no idea what to do. My hand trembled as I took the napkin. The paper felt strangely significant in my palm. Thanks, I managed to whisper. No problem, he said. Hope to hear from you. He gave me one last smile and then continued down the aisle. I stood there for a full minute, my heart pounding in my ears, staring at the phone number on the napkin. I felt a dizzying, chaotic mix of emotions. I was terrified. I was embarrassed. I felt like a liar and a freak. But underneath it all, hidden in the deepest, most secret part of my heart, there was a tiny, undeniable thrill, a spark of warmth that had nothing to do with shame. It was the feeling of being seen, of being found attractive. It was a purely female experience, and for the first time, it didn't feel entirely like a violation. It felt complicated. I quickly finished my shopping and fled the store. Back in the safety of my apartment, I threw the napkin in the trash, but I couldn't throw away the feeling. The encounter with Mark had changed something. It had cracked the wall of my resistance, just a little. It planted a seed of curiosity about this new life, about this new person I was forced to be. Maybe, just maybe, being Abby wasn't only a prison. Maybe, in some ways, I couldn't yet understand. It was also a door. The months that followed were a slow, unsteady dance between resistance and exploration. The encounter with Mark in the supermarket had been a catalyst. It didn't magically make me accept my situation, but it did make me realize that hiding from the world wasn't a viable strategy. I was Abby now, whether I liked it or not, and I had to learn how to exist. I started small. I forced myself to go out every day, even if it was just for a walk in the park. I began to pay more attention to the women around me, studying how they walked, how they carried themselves, how they interacted with the world. It was like learning a foreign language, and my accent was thick with masculinity. Allison and I kept in touch, mostly through texts and occasional phone calls. Her life was taking off in a way that was both astonishing and intimidating. She'd been discovered by a photographer on Instagram and had started doing some modeling work. Her perfect, genetically engineered features made her an instant success. Soon, her face was on online boutiques and in local fashion magazines. She loved the attention, the validation. She was born for it. You should try it. Abby, she told me on the phone one day, you're beautiful. You could do it too. No, I said immediately. That's your world. Allison, not mine. The idea of intentionally putting myself on display, of inviting the world to look at me, was still my personal definition of hell. But I did start to experiment in my own quiet way. I bought a book on makeup and spent an entire weekend in front of my bathroom mirror, trying to master the mysteries of eyeliner and foundation. My first attempts were disastrous. I looked like a sad clown, but slowly I got better. I learned that a little bit of mascara could make my eyes look wider, that a touch of blush could give my pale cheeks some life. It felt less like a disguise and more like saw armor, a way to face the world with a little more confidence. I started to buy clothes that I actually liked, not just things that would hide my shape. I discovered I liked the feel of soft cashmere sweaters and the way a well-cut A-line skirt moved when I walked. I even bought another pair of heels, a pair of wedge sandals that were more stable and practiced walking in them around my apartment until it started to feel less like a balancing act and more like walking. There were still bad days. Days when I would catch my reflection in a shop window and feel a gut-wrenching wave of dissociation. Days when a stranger's catcall on the street would make me feel small and angry. Days when I would lie in bed and ache with a phantom limb-like grief for the body and the life I had lost. But the good days started to outnumber the bad. There was a strange freedom in being Abby. As Jack, I had been a failure, unemployed, uninspired, unloved. My identity had been a heavy coat of expectations I could never live up to. But Abby had no past. No one expected anything of her. She could be anyone she wanted to be. One afternoon, I was sitting in the coffee shop that Mark had recommended I never called him. But I did find the shop. I was reading a book, wearing a simple floral dress I'd bought the week before, a dress I genuinely thought was pretty. The barista, a young woman named Chloe, brought over my latte. "I love your dress, Abby," she said with a genuine smile. "It looks really great on you." "Oh, thanks," I said, surprised. "No, really," she insisted. "That color is perfect for your skin tone." It was such a small thing, a simple, friendly compliment from one woman to another. But it landed differently than Mark's flirting. It wasn't about attraction. It was about appreciation. It was a moment of connection, of being seen and accepted as part of a club I never asked to join. I felt a warmth spread through my chest, a feeling of belonging that was completely new. I smiled back at her, a real, unforced smile. "Thank you, Chloe." That evening, I sat down with a journal I had bought but never used. I wanted to try and untangle the knot of feelings inside me. I started writing, and the words just poured out. I wrote about Jack, about the heist, about the terror and the pain of the transformation. I wrote about my fear and my shame. And then I wrote about the small moments, the feel of a soft sweater, the pride of finally mastering a French braid, the warmth of a simple compliment. I wrote for hours, and when I finally put the pen down, I wrote one last sentence on a fresh page. "My name is Abby. I was Jack, but in a strange way, Abby feels more real now. Jack was running from his life. Abby is just living." It was the truth, a complicated, messy, and unbelievable truth. A few days later, I saw Allison on the cover of a national fashion magazine at a newsstand. Allison Parker, the mysterious new face of fashion. She looked incredible, poised, powerful, and completely at home in her skin. There was a quote from her at the bottom of the cover. "The best decision I ever made," it read, "was to stop running and start living as me." I bought the magazine and took it home. Looking at her picture, I didn't feel the usual pang of jealousy or inadequacy. I just felt a quiet sense of peace. We had taken two very different paths, she and I. She had charged headfirst into her new life, building an empire on the foundation of her new identity. I had stumbled, fought, and resisted my way through it. But in the end, we had both arrived at the same place. I was no longer Jack, the failed graphic designer. I was no longer the frightened creature in David's lab. I was Abby. I was a woman who liked floral dresses and cashmere sweaters. A woman who was still a little clumsy in heels, but was getting better. A woman who was starting to see the person in the mirror not as a stranger, but as a survivor. I didn't know what the future held for Abby Winters. Her story was just beginning. But for the first time since that fateful night in the warehouse, I wasn't afraid to find out what happened next. I had stopped running. I was finally ready to live.